appreciative. I'm going to just gather. Hi, Renee. How are you? I'm going to gather our attention a little bit. I'm Kate Gabriel. I'm, as many of you are, an organizer with DSA, New York City DSA. That's not everyone in this room. That's only some of us. If you're not from DSA, that's great. Could I, David or someone else, could I get the music off? That would be fabulous. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to see people again on a Friday. I'm really feeling the week. And also the other thing that I'm feeling is a lot of rage about this budget, which we need to talk about. So I'm grateful to you all for bringing your time and your attention and your energy before you go into your weekend, whatever you have planned. I'm gonna talk not that much. We have a panel tonight of organizers with DSA who've really broken down the budget and are gonna talk to us about what's at stake, what we all stand to lose to this year, what the Eric Adams administration is planning, and how we organized against it. Councilmember Tiffany Caban is here. Hi, Tiffany. We also have workers from, we have city workers who are going to be joining me on the panel up here, and we have, again, as I said, DSA organizers who are going to break down the budget. So I'm going to bring up Brian and Alicia. Is it both of you, or is it just Brian for this part? Brian, do you want to come up here? Thank you so much. Okay, great. Let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce my comrade Brian Keppel. So again, the way that tonight is going to go, we're going to just talk about what is in the budget, what the mayor is already planning, the really obscene cuts that are threatening schools, libraries, childcare, social services, sanitation from a mayor who says he hates rats, 5,500 union jobs, and then we're going to talk about, we're going to bring the entire panel up, and I'm going to moderate. So I'll kick things over to Brian.
There we go. Okay, it's working. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Keppel. So I'm just going to take you through some of the top line budget numbers here. If I can get this to work, which is a big... there we go. Okay, so first let's talk about revenue, because revenue is the undergirding of the entire budget. The city needs to... It's required to have a balanced budget. So in order to make expenditures, they have to show where the revenue is coming from. The way they do this is revenue projections. So the purple bar is the projection for fiscal year 23, which we're in right now. And I'm showing this to you specifically to call your attention to the darker purple bar next to it, because that is the projection for the current year. So where we are right now, if we go back in time a year, that's what they said we were going to raise, and the light purple bar is what we actually did raise. So the OMB consistently underprojects revenue. This is important because it limits how much agencies can spend. If you look at modified budgets compared to adopted budgets, the revenue always goes up, and it mostly goes to debt service. So... whoop. Okay, and so the light purple part is the other funding that makes up the revenue. So this is federal, this is state, this is any kind of additional aid. The dark purple is city funding. There's a lot of talk about shortfalls because of the expiration of federal COVID dollars. We don't see that happening. There's like a moderate shortfall occurring. Most of the COVID money has already been spent. So when people tell you we don't have money because there's no revenue, well, the revenue projections are historically low. And then the federal money has already been spent. So these aren't reasons to cut the budget in the way that they're talking about. And this is, so I'm going to get up. Okay. So what we have here is, this is the preliminary budget broken down by category. This is the modified, and this is the adopted, and that was the previous adopted. So education, again, makes up the largest proportion of the budget, but here we have economic development spending, and you can see the difference in the orange. Economic development spending is mostly subsidies and giveaways to corporations. So we're shrinking other areas of the budget because it's a whole pie, and in order to account for shortfalls in other areas. That is backwards. Okay, so in the preliminary, broken down by category, these are the cuts. I've been looking at city budgets for a little while now, and it's striking because normally you have difficulty saying one way or another because some things go up, some things go down. It's hard to get a coherent narrative. This one, it's pretty goddamn easy because everything is cut. There are cuts across the board. So we see a culture and recreation, 13%, building and construction, so new affordable housing, almost 20%. We have 10% cuts in higher education, over 10% in homeless prevention. Oversight is a huge one, almost 35% cut. That's kind of a bad thing when you have a mayor who plays fast and loose with ethics. Okay, these are the categories again. I'm gonna skip this just because we're short on time here. So if you wanna see what goes up, this is what goes up. This is debt service. This is money paid to banks to make up the debt that they've taken out. This is a category called miscellaneous spending, which mostly accounts for fringe benefits. This is pension contributions. And all the way on the end, it's a minuscule increase is community boards. So that's what goes up in the preliminary budget. What goes down? Everything. So these are the largest cuts. These are over $50 million. Department of Social Services, administering benefits to people in need in the middle of a pandemic. Huge cut. Over $550 million. We have DOE, again, this is mostly accounting for the doing away of universal 3K and also huge cuts to special schools. Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Kind of important if you're just recovering from a pandemic. DYCD, community programs, so Department of Youth and Community Development. Health and Hospitals Corporation. CUNY, all across the board, gigantic cuts. And then these are smaller cuts. So everything gets cut. Department of Parks and Recreation is here. This is the mayor, so things like DCACs, and then DDC, BOE. So everything is cut across the board. Budgeted positions. These are, so this is adopted, this is modified, and this is preliminary. It doesn't look that big there, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of positions, and to get a better sense of it, we can see here. So down on the bottom, that's the number of positions that were lost by, if I can see it, DOE. Okay, DOE. The purple bar here is DSS. These are huge cuts. Now they're going to say that these are mostly vacant positions. Well, why are they vacant? We've had conservative administrations since for the past pretty much as far long as I've been alive. They aren't creating positions that they don't intend to fill or that they don't need. And then the last slide here, this is the capital budget, which we're not really going to get into because we don't have time and it's hard to organize against, but we see the same sort of cuts. So the purple bar, it's more in line with the adopted than the expense budget is. But capital funding is cut, and one thing that they do is they'll transfer money from the capital budget to the expense budget. They're not supposed to, but they will do it. It's called a capital transfer. And so that is the end of the presentation. I'm sure we all feel very good about what's about to happen. So now I can take any questions. We didn't really have time to get into the specifics, and the details always matter with these things. But if there are any questions, maybe Kay will moderate.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I can tell you right now. Let's see. So the debt service number, let me just pull up the spreadsheets.
We've been asked to ask questions into the mic. So could I get a runner actually? Tiffany, are you sure? Okay, word.
So the
Thank you,
debt service in the preliminary is $5.734 billion.
So I saw in the job cuts a section for NYPD, which is a section I think a lot of us would like to see cut. So I'm curious, how do those job cuts stack against what maybe we'd be wanting to see for that department?
I think it's smaller than we wanted to see. It's also positions that this is where the budgeted positions thing, the vacant positions being cut, sort of works against us, because those are positions that are being cut that are empty right now, as in they're not out on the street criminalizing New Yorkers and hurting lots of people. So those positions, we're happy to see them go away, but it isn't a headcount reduction. These are all subject to change, and they are planning more training academy classes. So right now it looks like it's a moderate, it's about maybe a 1-point-something% difference when compared to the total NYPD, which has one of the largest workforces of any agency by far.
Is this on? Oh, great. Oh, yes. My name is Alicia. I just wanted to add another response on specifically this great question on NYPD headcount reductions, and that's what we want. And it's a department notorious for overtime spending, and so it's complicated to think about, well, if there are fewer officers, is that good? But how much like officer time on the street is being spent, and if it's an agency that can just kind of spend time and money at will above and beyond what is in the budget, there's both like a lack of accountability there, and also the budget isn't actually like a true representation of what's going on. And so like last year was the biggest overtime spending for the NYPD that we've ever seen at $762 million. And like I'll stop there, but I'm sure we'll keep having this conversation.
And they've volume fluctuations. Okay. And they've budgeted the smallest amount that they've ever budgeted for overtime. So yeah, likely to stick with that.
Hi. I saw in the oversight budget was cut the most, 35% or so. What exactly does oversight mean? Yeah. Okay.
It's a good question. So
wait, I want to talk about it too. While you're pulling it up.
Yes,
oversight is everything that allows us to look under the hood. So what falls under oversight is Department of Investigations, the CCRB, the Board of Corrections. What else am I missing, Brian? You can like.
I'm trying to filter the spreadsheet by category. Hold on.
And so while he's filtering, I'll just talk. But like,
Please.
for example, you know, there was just an article about how the Commissioner of Corrections, Commissioner Molina, revoked the BOC's ability to look at in real time video footage. And his response was just like, because I feel like they have an agenda and they're against us. And it's like, but they're an oversight body. They exist to like hold you accountable and look at what's happening. And so, you know, for agencies that already don't really have the capacity to do that kind of oversight, to slash them by 35% is a really big deal, because now you're getting into conversations of like, yes, we talk so much about austerity, but like also I mean, quite frankly, like what about corruption? What about accountability? Like that has to be hand in hand with the conversations we're having.
So the CCRB, Office of Administrative Tax Appeals, the Department of Investigation, which some people think is carceral. The Department of Investigation actually investigates the government itself. So it's an oversight agency. And Board of Correction, which Tiffany mentioned, the Equal Employment Practices Commission, Conflicts of Interest Board, Office of Administrative Trials and Hearings, and that is all of them.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, right here. Yeah.
Hi. So can you name who the creditors of the city? You mentioned that debt servicing is that's a huge chunk of why there's a big reason, or the reason why there's all these cuts across the board. So who are the creditors of the city? And second, I'm wondering, like, if you know which of the departments of the city oversee like funding to public defender agencies and also the DA. Would that be the Department of Social Services?
So
I can tell you for public defenders that we contract with the city. They're not government employees, though, in the same way that prosecutors are.
Some of it also comes from the state. Like immigration defense mostly comes from the state. So it's like it's broken down functionally by area, which makes it very hard to track, which is a big problem. And then I don't know who the major creditors are, but that's an excellent question that someone should look into.
Are there any nerds in the audience who are like, oh, I know? Because I don't know. It's a really good question. We should look into this. Great. Now we have homework.
Most large banks have municipal bond departments who like specialize in city bonds, buying and then repackaging and selling them to individual investors. So I imagine that the largest payments are to Chase, Merrill Lynch. Yeah.
No, there's a lot of room. Hi, I'm Ruthie Gilmore. There's a lot of room for campaign building in all the aspects of the problems with the budget. And when it comes to debt service, as you just said, Brian, all kinds of investment banks, big ones, small ones, package debt for cities and other municipalities, and that debt is sold on. It's generally sold to institutional investors, not individual investors. So very often, the owners of the debt are pension funds and other entities that we should be trying to organize. That's my entire point.
Oh, wow. Hi. That's very useful. Thank you. Are there other questions for Brian and Alicia? If not, I want to bring up the rest of the panel. Yes, please, one more.
Brian, you mentioned the DOE and specifically the pre-K. Is pre-K being rolled back? Is it not being expanded? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
It's not being expanded, and Universal 3K is almost entirely done away with.
If I could also reframe that. So the way that the mayor's office has put this is that it is this program is not being expanded, but if a program that was supposed to grow and develop to a certain point is hamstrung and no longer able to do that, that is a cut, right? It's a cut of what it was going to be, right? It's not a cut of where it currently is, but where it currently is minuscule, right? That is a cut. It's just being spun in a kind of smart way. And on that note, can I bring up, one more question, please.
Thank you, Tiffany. I wanted to ask, firstly, we've seen, I guess, Senate Republicans and, Hochul sue Senate Democrats over the whole LaSalle vote, and we're now seeing redistricting coalitions, I believe, suing the redistricting commission. Is there any way for us, or city council members to sue the mayor or the city for, what's going on with the budget? Is that an option?
It has happened. It hasn't happened recently.
Can you guys do
But
it?
there have been, I think there was an instance under the Bloomberg administration where they actually went to court. There was another instance over with one of the mayors. I forget which one. But yes, there have been, I don't know if it's city council suing the mayor so much as the courts arbitrating a difference of opinion between the two bodies, but do you know any more?
I'm not that kind of nerd. I don't.
Okay.
Sorry. I know some things, not those things.
There have been budget disagreements that have gone to court historically, so it's not out of the question, I don't think.
Well, and this will be my final moment of editorializing before I bring up the panel and just ask questions. So the city is supposed to, has a legal responsibility to fulfill, to review food stamps applications within 30 days. It cannot do that, right, currently. There was a city limits report from December that shows that something like half of all food stamps applications take the city longer than the legally required limit to fulfill. So this is what happens when you cut city positions by cutting vacancies, right? How is Eric Adams producing these vacancies in the first place? By creating, as DC 37 workers in the audience will be able to tell us, creating awful conditions for people to work in, intentionally offering only the lowest salary ranges to potential workers, driving out workers, making it impossible for people to work from home, things like this, trying to fill office buildings in Midtown, right? Such that there are all these vacant positions. Once there are vacant positions in city government, the city cannot fulfill its legal responsibility, its legally mandated responsibilities, right? And what we do with that, what courts are able to do with that is, I'm not at all a lawyer, I don't know, but that is ultimately going to be a matter of people power. Whether we are actually able to enforce what are legally rights on paper. And at that point, I would love to invite Tiffany and Kate and Anae to join us up here.
The city is currently being sued for the failure of administering food stamps.
Oh, word. Interesting. Okay, there we go. There we go. Great.
So,
yeah.
And I guarantee that if there are vacant positions, the next budget that Mayor Adams puts forward will see those vacant positions cut, and he'll claim that he's only eliminating vacant positions of workers who were forced out because of terrible conditions, and it'll just continue to spiral.
And on that note, I would love to just invite everyone here to please just introduce yourself, why you're here, kind of what your stake in this fight is. I'll kick it off to Kate.
Kate Connors, I'm a public school teacher for the New York City Department of Education, as well as a member of the Rank and File Educators, the Union Caucus that's progressive, and the Social Justice Caucus.
hey y'all, my name is Tiffany Kaman. I'm the council member in the 22nd District in Western Queens. You know, I don't know, my stake in this fight is wanting our communities to thrive. You know, socialist abolitionist, and we definitely can't build out a caring economy and robust, you know, public health and public safety infrastructure with budgets that look like this. So that is absolutely what's at stake.
Hi, my name's Alicia. Okay, let me know if you can't hear me. But I am an organizer with New York City-DSA member. I mainly do work in the racial justice working group, have been a part of our defund the NYPD city budget campaigns for the past couple of years, really activated by spending the week at Occupy City Hall, remembering watching that city budget vote on a big projector with everyone. And my background in terms of like work and study is as a public health researcher, specifically researching gun violence and other kinds of violence and safety and sort of what keeps communities safe and whole and what works. And it is absolutely not the plan that the mayor has been putting forward. And so like feel deeply invested in getting us on the right track for what really would work. And it's painful to see us going in the opposite direction.
Hi, my name is Anaí Loyola, and I am part of the New York Public Library staff. I am here just to kind of show out and voice out for all, Latin American people. I am Mexican American, and this is a very big purpose for me to kind of defend what I have just started as a librarian, and this is my beginning of a career, and hoping that this can be stopped before it can be built into something more.
Totally. So I actually want to start with Annie and Kate. I would love for you guys to talk about, what your experience of working as a librarian and a teacher, a public school teacher in the past year has been like. How has that been different from previous years? So we have like just over a year of the Adams administration, and sort of what is the difference? How are you feeling it?
This year has been very chaotic as far as the budget cuts has reduced the amount of teachers we've been able to keep in schools, destabilizing the school environment. Hundreds and hundreds of teachers were excessed, leaving their schools. And this is, of course, we're still in a pandemic. We have a population of students who 1 out of every 200 have lost a parent or caregiver to COVID. We have a very vulnerable population that need consistency, that need that care, and that was taken from them. And then we've also seen the attack on our 3K programs where, educational coordinators and social workers were pulled from these programs. And these positions are so important, working with these young kids who need to be identified if there's any need for additional assistance for these students with learning and development. And early identification of these issues is key for effective intervention. And also, sadly, we've seen the school districts becoming more carceral. The amount of schools with metal detectors has increased, and this big support of cops in schools, and no talk of restorative justice at this point, and that's been super disappointing and harmful to our students.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in the part for New York Public Library, I'm in a very special position because I just started this job after the pandemic ended, and having to hear from my coworkers who had been there for 5 years before me, they have spoken about how all libraries were closed off during the pandemic, and all they could do was kind of a pickup, stop off, kind of just loaning books. But then that kind of closed us off to doing programs. And as we began to reopen the branches, we realized that our staff shortages have become even more fatal, to a point that we had to close branches off for not even just days, but weeks. And even then, we were not able to constantly be open. Sometimes we'd have to cut our times of opening hours, and we would have to work with only 5 people on hand when it should have been about 15 or 16 plus on staff. And that is something that we're still kind of suffering from, and it's still something we're gonna keep going through, I believe, and I fear.
Totally. So, that's this past year, but then, we can look ahead going forward. And what do you guys think you stand to lose if these budget cuts go ahead? What services do you think are going to be cut? What are your managers or I don't know, superiors are telling you? Are there going to be further staff who might be accessed? Are there going to be other branch closures? What is sort of at stake, not just, of course, for you, but for New Yorkers?
So I really think that when it comes to the staff, definitely there's going to be a lot of cuts. A lot of, especially the more experienced and veteran staff, will probably be cut off, which is very tragic to see happen. And not only that, we won't be able to produce programming or services to reach out to our community and reach out to local organizations, which is what we're really a stronghold for. And beyond all that, there is the ultimate ending of just closing off branches because there's not enough budgeting, and our managers are going to say, well, this is the end for it. I don't know what else to tell you. You're going to be transferred off to another branch and just hope that you'll make it through. And that's pretty much the end all.
Dark, yes. Kate?
Yeah, I mean.
Really bad.
Yes, very bad. We're going to continue to see teachers accessed from the classroom and staff accessed from school buildings. And we're also probably going to see teachers teaching out of licenses to make up for those classes that need to be covered. Maybe a science teacher who teaches earth science is now going to have to cover biology classes, and that might not be their expertise, and they might not be getting the best possible experience in that class as if they had the licensed professional in that classroom. We're also supposed to be preparing for implementation of the class sizes bill, where we're supposed to reduce each class by at least 10 students. And if we're cutting teachers, we're not going to have the ability to do that. And if we're taking school capital budget money and spending it on cameras and door buzzers, which was happening right now, up to $78 billion is going to be spent on cameras that are outside the exits that will identify visitors who will then have to show their ID and be buzzed in by security during the school day rather than having an open, welcoming school community. And that's going to be problematic as well.
Totally. I mean, just to kind of draw a connection there, both of you are talking about like public space and public buildings that in both cases, young people are like either supposed to, mandated to be in, or are welcome to be in, that have to be closed and services sort of cut off or somehow limited because of budget cutbacks. And let's just remind everyone, the budget cutbacks are not because there's no surplus in the budget. Like this is what Brian was talking about.
Yeah, the Department of Education goes down by over 1,000 positions. The cut is in all funds. It's nearly 300 million. Each public library, so New York Public, Brooklyn Public, Queensborough, almost cut by almost 10%. Each one over $10 million. So imagine a 10% reduction in the current conditions. What you have now minus 10%. That's what we're going to be dealing with.
And can you talk just a little bit again about like just remind us about the budget surplus? I know that people are really smart and they can put it together, but just talk about the money that's there.
Yeah, so when we under project revenue, one thing that happens is at the end of the year, a lot more taxes come in than they originally assumed. That money hasn't been budgeted to any specific program. So we typically in recent years ended with a surplus. We're going to have a surplus at the end of this fiscal year. What happens to that surplus? Most often, the largest percentage of it is rolled over into the next year's budget in order to pay down debt service. So we have the money there. It's just not being used. And the other thing about the revenue projections is when we have a surplus, there's no city council oversight for that. It's extra money, so the mayor pretty much just gets to decide where it goes. So it's not only a financial problem, it's a democracy problem.
Thank you. Another question for you guys. I guess moving out of just being negative, what would, though I love that, it's useful. What would fully funding schools and libraries look like? Who would benefit from our expanded programs and services? What could people be getting that we don't currently have?
I think that when we want to dream really big and think about that, I think there's so much that can be impacted by it greatly if we had full funded libraries where it's like, not only do we have the programming, right? It becomes more diverse. We can do more outreach to not only just to schools, right? And talk to our local teachers and faculty, but also to local organizations, which we haven't had the time to do, right? Because we have short staffing. If we had more staffing, we would probably be able to go and reach out and do all of these connections and programs and events that can help one another to show, hey, you have a public space that can be yours and you can do what you want with it, because it's not about just the staff having the library there, but matter of the public being able to use the library as they wish to. And this can bring up so much more of a connection between how we use our services and implement it and just give it back to you, because that's all we want to do, really. So that's what fully funded libraries can do.
Yeah, and fully funded schools, real fully funded schools are quality and free education, 3K through a full CUNY, SUNY, college degree. And I'd like to just I'd rather be talking about additional programs that if we were fully funded, we'd be able to offer, but we have to start from like the smallest thing. We still have ventilation issues. We have temperature issues. There are rooms in my school that get so hot. People have been getting physically ill by teaching in them all day. Kids have been ill from being in that room where it's 80, 90 degrees. And that's not against any contractual obligation of them to supply us in an air-conditioned, comfortable room. So until we provide schools where it's comfortable to learn, and we have an actual physical environment that's inviting and welcoming, we need to start there. And then we need the art classes, we need the dance classes, we need the creative classes, and everyone will benefit from these things, everyone.
Yeah, I'm reminded of, you talked about the capital budget that's going for schools, that's going to putting in cameras and door buzzers when, people cannot physically be present in the schoolrooms because they're passing out. Mm-hmm. So it's like that, which also tells us, right, like when we are like, well, we want money for schools, even within that, we have to fight for what it's spent on, right? I have a question for Alicia and for Tiffany. I wonder, like obviously the mayor says that his signature issue is public safety, right? And he said that for 2 years since he was a candidate. And I'm wondering, when you see cuts to these public programs that affect young people, I'm just curious what you think that the effect is on public safety.
Yeah, I mean, even just going off of, let's take the school example. We have seen an uptick in school-based violence. I know that in my colleague's district, I think in a week, there were 2 violent incidents in schools, and she put out a statement which really focused on the fact that like the children don't have good interventions and spaces, right? To learn how to mediate conflict, to just keep themselves busy after school, and supports around those things. And I was talking to some of the principals in my district, D30, after the mayor made his announcement about how every school now needs to have this weekly call with the NYPD, and them being confused about like what they were supposed to get out of those calls, and really them begging the question of like, this isn't what we asked for. What we really need is programming. We don't have extra programming. We want all of our schools to have after school. And even the schools in my district that have after school, they don't have capacity for all of the students. Maybe they can serve maybe 50 students. The need is far, far greater than that. So that's just one example of like how we are less safe, but also how we are just pouring resources into the wrong things. We're just throwing money and resources away. Looking at, just on the most basic, or if I could zoom out in terms of a framework, when you cut the Department of Social Services, when you cut DHS, when you cut DOHMH, right? What you are doing is effectively creating social ills, right? The inability to deliver those services, the inability to have a workforce that supports the deliverance of those services creates social ills that we feel in our communities every day. And you can only then address it in one way when you have all of those steep cuts, but you have the maintenance of a bloated police budget. So you take social ills and you criminalize them, right? And then the only thing to throw at them, the only thing with enough workers and resources to fill these gaping holes becomes the police department. And they are not the agency that are going to get you the better health outcomes, the better public safety outcomes. And that is like by the numbers, by the science, by the empirical evidence and research. There is decades worth to show that this is not an approach that works. And so, that's the undercutting, right? Like saying that we are not going to have mental health professionals meet folks who are experiencing mental health challenges, and even worse, serious mental illness and acute crisis, for example. But you're going to have somebody else respond to that. And what I've learned from going from city to city, just using mental health response as an example, is that it is not the mental health crisis or the mental health challenge that creates a dangerous or deadly situation, overwhelmingly it is sending the wrong responder with the wrong response. And we've seen that with the policing approach to mental health. And then obviously also the goal has to be to respond less, right? Like that, we need to be looking and be really targeted around what our metrics of success are, because that's a limited response too. Yes, we want people out in the field who are the right workers who can respond in crisis, but ultimately the goal is to build out an infrastructure, a continuum of care, so that we're measuring our success by, did we respond less over a certain period of time because the infrastructure exists, and that infrastructure comes directly from those agencies that we saw are getting cut. So that's just a couple of examples. Sorry, I can go
No,
for a
don't
while.
be.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'll underscore everything Tiffany says. I'll add a couple of things. One is just to have a broader view of what community safety is. Some of the work we do in DSA's Racial Justice Working Group is to go into communities and spend time in the communities that we're in and have like lengthy conversations with people about what safety would mean in their communities, and just listen, ask that question and just listen. And the things that people bring up are so simple and yet absolutely not addressed by Adams's budget. Things like, I live in a night shift building and the front door is physically broken, so that means it can't close and it can't stay locked, and that means I don't know who is coming in and out of my building, and I live in a home where I don't control the access, and that makes me feel unsafe. Okay, simple. We all understand it. Most of us do not own our homes in New York, and feeling like you are in charge of where you live is a big part of public safety. And to not be funding NYCHA, to not be fixing broken doors, that's public safety. Why not start there? Other concerns that come up so much, like I live in Harlem, but close to the George Washington Bridge. And so many people in my community bring up the terrifying traffic violence, especially around school pickup and drop off, because the streets are close to the exit ramps from the George Washington Bridge. People are driving so fast. And okay, that is a community safety concern. And people have ideas like, what if we close off those streets to cars at those times? Like, so many ideas, and yet it is scary to live in a community where you are not in control of your environment and where your safety is not prioritized by your city. And so having a more expansive view of like, what is community safety? Whereas when the mayor talks about like, I'm the public safety mayor, he's talking about it in a way that is so racist and so anti-poor, so anti-homeless. What he's saying is like, I don't want to feel uncomfortable when I see a poor person on the street. I don't want to feel uncomfortable like encountering homelessness in the subway. And I think that is so the budget, like people say like a budget is a moral document, and we can think of it like that, but I feel like a budget is a self-fulfilling prophecy when you are the executive. And what this budget is doing is underfunding so many of our essential services, and then also underfunding the oversight agencies like Tiffany was talking about, so that we are not able to deliver SNAP benefits, so that we are not able to let people who even have housing vouchers to be able to use them to get into homes. Underfunding every piece of the puzzle that sustains New Yorkers' lives, and then not even being able to do the oversight. And then it's such a Republican trick. This is the self-fulfilling prophecy to say, oh, look how crappy the government is. And then to say, well, we shouldn't have faith in the government and all our government agencies can't do anything. And New Yorkers are suffering, but it's their fault. And so it justifies further cuts to the government because those agencies are corrupt and no good anyways. It's just like keeps this tailspin, and like Tiffany was saying, and now the only solution is the police. Let's go in and lock everyone up.
What a mess.
And I want to add something to this because I think it's worth having like a little bit of the tough part of the conversation is, what we'll find sort of in like the public discourse or the pushback is that, well, there are plenty of people who don't want a reduction in policing. And it's true that when you pose the question in a very limited and shallow way, for understandable reasons, you will have communities and community members say, well, I think we still need them here. That sounds a little scary to me. But there are folks who are having much deeper, longer, intentional conversations. And I'll give you just an example. It's happening in lots of different places. But the conversations, person to person, neighbor and neighbor, are wildly different, and there's a different takeaway. So I'll give you an example. We have a small business community in my district. We have a volunteer public safety team. We have interviewed with well over 50, 60 different small businesses around public safety issues. We do really regular, in lots of different places and spaces, public safety conversations. And consistently, the bottom line, when we dedicate the time to have a 15, 20, 30 minute, 40, 45 minute conversation, is that well above anything else, when you ask someone to be present, to visualize, to think about what being safe looks like, smells like, tastes like, who's around you, what is and isn't there, and then say, well, what is missing in your community? They're not like more police officers or the presence of police officers aren't a part of that vision. And the things that are coming up most consistently are relationships. They want to know who their neighbors are. They want to be able to recognize people. They want to be in well-populated places. They want busy corridors and full train stations, and they want really good lighting. They want lighting so that they have visibility. They want to be able to see things, and they want to be able to know the people around them. That, I'm telling you, over thousands and thousands of conversations, when it comes down to it, is like at the core of the feeling of safety for so many people. And so doing the hard work of having those conversations to get to the common denominator so that then we can start talking about these infrastructure questions and like where we put our dollars is the work that we have to do.
It's also notable to me that the pollsters really come out when they say, well, however many people don't agree with the idea of there being like less police funding or defunding the police or cutting cutting police officers, but nobody ever polls or asks, well, do you support defunding schools? Do you support defunding libraries? How do you feel about having fewer teachers, right? Like if this conversation were ever had in a good faith way, which it is not, but if it were, then there would be excellent polling about how many working class everyday New Yorkers feel really bad about the idea that there are no teachers. Like that would actually be like a question that a journalist would pose, right? Or that a polling agency would put money behind. Obviously, it's not like this conversation is being conducted in good faith. It's being conducted with a political agenda, and we know that. But it's just remarkable to me that the one situation in which we really feel the pull of democracy is about how many police officers there are, and not well, do you support or oppose the shuttering of your local library branch? Do you support or oppose the fact that this MTA bus is now no longer going to run in your neighborhood, so you can't actually get adequate transit after 11 p.m., right? All of a sudden that becomes a matter of local activists who are really mad about a local issue and they're being annoying, not the people massively oppose this thing that's being robbed of them. Sorry, you had something.
And I don't think that people really realize how massive the police department is. So even under the cuts in the preliminary budget, which I looked it up, the cuts are only about 1% of the police budget. There are over nearly 50,000 people in the NYPD. How many people work for the Department of Social Services? About 12,100. Not even half the number to administer all the programs in the city. Not even half the number of police officers. And I think there's a reason you never see those kind of comparisons, because even someone who is staunchly pro-police looks at that and says, well, that's insane, because it is an insane ratio to have. No wonder we have problems in the city when it's that stark, the differences between how we're staffing these agencies and where our resources are going.
Totally. I have one more question for Kate and then I want to talk about like what's next in the budget fight. Because of course, as people who do this a lot know, we're like at the start of a long wrestling match. That last year, some people really lost very badly. This year, can we do better? Really good question. But for Kate and Anae, like you're both members of unions, UFT, DC 37. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how your unions could, although they might not be, like we are not, but how they could take more assertive positions opposing these cuts.
So I'm going to be really controversial here about my union. I love how the feeling is very mutual. There's a lot of rage. There's a lot of just like, I can't believe this is happening. Why is this happening? We need to just like overthrow it. We have to do something. Great. What are we going to do? And it's really pretty much all I can say at this moment is we have something coming up where it's like, great, we have a contract. Why are we not talking about the fine print? Why are we not talking about, we have all these increases, sure, but what is the backlash of it behind it? Why aren't you talking about this right now instead of just talking about how you really hate what is going on right now? I get it, I understand, but don't be distracted by everything that's going around you when you have something in front of you. If we come in together in a unity, right, as a union would, we should be looking to see if this is what we truly, really want. If we have a vote for something, we need to discuss it. Just as Tiffany said, if we can take about 30, 45 minutes discussing something where we can all say, okay, these are our basic guidelines. This is what we're looking for. This is our ideology. This is what we're gonna go forth with. Let's fight for this, and this is what we want. If we can have at least that first step, that can prove to be a greater impact showing what it is that we're looking for ahead for our workforce and for the future of many other librarians who are to come and who want to study this and who want to be an outreach for the public in New York City. So
totally, thank you.
That sounds like I want to distill that, or I want to do some mirroring, or like that sounds like you're communicating, offering a positive vision, like offering what it is that we want to fight for.
We need more militant unions in New York. They're not really there. If you're in the United Federation of Teachers, if you're a teacher, you're a UFT member, join the Progressive Caucus, the movement of rank and file educators. We are working hard. We're the opposition caucus to Unity, and Michael Mulgrew, who is essentially greenlighting all these things that the mayor is doing and then feigning outrage after the community voices, their outrage of what's happening here with education in New York City. But we need to build power in those progressive caucuses. We need to run in elections. We need to do these things. We need to unite, and we need to not be complacent. We need to push it until our union leaders are not engaging in business, top-down unionism, and we used to get some real class struggle unionism happening.
Thank you so much. So I guess final question, and then of course you guys, I'm sure you may have more questions. But the question, and I guess maybe I'll kind of kick it back to Tiffany and Alicia. Can you just lead us through, for those who don't live and breathe this calendar, what's next in the budget fight? Maybe Alicia, you can answer that, and Tiffany, what do your colleagues need to hear, especially your colleagues who are, let's say, self-identified progressives? What do they? What do they need to hear? And how do they need to hear it to develop a backbone that they maybe lacked last year? Sorry, that was pointed. Wait, do I have an agenda?
Just the broad strokes of the timeline, and this is what happens every year in the city. The mayor it's stacked towards the mayor. The mayor puts out his executive budget, which is kind of like a first proposal for what the city budget could be. That's what Brian has presented on. The preliminary budget, thank you. Yes. And we're not stuck with these numbers. You know, we are all here to fight against these numbers and make sure the final result is different. The next kind of stages are, I think the council will give a response. Yes. So there'll be a number of hearings like by topic. And these are hearings that like we can all show up at, even testify at, listen to, comment on, be angry about. So a ton of hearings. The council will give like a response with kind of like some edits to this budget. Then the mayor will come back with an executive budget, sort of the response to the response. And then finally, after some negotiations in-house, the council will vote on the final budget. And that's where we need a majority of yes votes from the council to pass the budget. And that's June.
It's not like the state budget, so it's an up or down vote, right? It's not like the state budget, it's a package of bills. So it's just like a straight, I'm voting for the budget in its entirety or I am not.
Yeah. And so I would say, how do we all on the outside, and only Tiffany here gets to vote, but we all on the outside, we can participate in these hearings. We can participate by being the thorn in the side of our local council member, of the mayor, of the speaker of the council, from now through June. And there's like those moments that I mentioned are sort of like flashpoints of intervention where we can turn up the pressure and see how things are developing. But also that final budget is the moment where we will see, okay, who's on board with the budget, yes or no, but also did we get this budget from the numbers that we saw from Brian towards something better for the city. So yeah, so I mean, we can talk more, and I'd love to talk more in the questions about how we can organize to both get the budget better and also turn some of our council members into productive negotiators for that better budget.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to the process too is, I mean, there are so many hearings. They're so long. There are multiple happening at the same time, and so the one thing that is a truth, and I guess this leads into answering the question that you posed, is that it's almost impossible to get a full picture of the budget. You're going to vote for a budget that you do not know everything that's in there. Period. You can't. You know, you get these binders that are this big. I chair the Committee on Women and Gender Equity, and I remember my first budget cycle being told of just like, well, your committee covers everything, so just like go to all of them and ask questions on all of them. I'm like, I can't take all of this in, and then my committee didn't have a financial analyst for most of it, so it was just like you're just drowning. So one way, and I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but you know, one way that everyday folks who are in some sense organized in their communities or have some level of professional or institutional knowledge on a thing is like, a lot of people don't know we welcome questions, right? Like if I'm going into a hearing, part of my prep is, yes, I am prepping my own lines of questioning, but I reach out to friends and say, hey, you're the organization that is leading on the advocacy in this work. Do you have questions you want or need me to ask? What information do you need to go out there and create more pressure and run a more targeted, effective campaign? Because it's the difference between like hitting something with a blunt object and being able to like execute something with a scalpel, right? So it is a way that you can get involved. But what do we need from the body in general? There were only 6 of us who voted no on the budget last year. And I'm gonna be really honest, it's not that there aren't like, there are only 6 council members who like give a fuck and, you know, care about these things. That is not the case. Like I wanna also dispel that. Like, there were folks that voted yes on a budget that, you know, again, wasn't my vote, wasn't how I the right thing that I thought to do. But I understood in some ways how difficult it was. I'm coming from outside spaces and am now like an internal, you know, mover or part of the dominant institution that like generally we're trying to change. And so my orientation, the tools in my toolbox are different. And I think having that also like ingrained sort of outside like strategy and demeanor just naturally makes some of us a little bit more bold and willing to like take some risks. But you have to think about what's going to make members move. And for some folks, it's like, fear, accountability, and community, because elected officials are people with a lot of power, but they're just people. And like on the most human level, we have to be part of something, part of some kind of community or collective. And the idea of being rejected and isolated and being by yourself is like gonna move you to do a thing no matter what. Like that's the humanness in us. So I think a combination of things needed to be present is that when you go into the body, you go in intellectually knowing that institutional power is heavy and it's like really overwhelming, whether it's from, concentrated power from the speaker's office or from the mayor's office. But then you get in there and you're like, whoa, this was 10 times heavier than I thought. Jabbar, do you agree? This is fucking 10 times heavier than I thought it would be. And the pressures are immense. And so everybody is also trying to figure out kind of where they feel safe and where their power comes from and where they have to align to be able to deliver on whatever it is they think that they want to deliver on. And so if you have more of a fear of the institutional power rather than feeling a bigger desire for accountability from the outside, is going to be a really big deal. So I think that what we collectively need to do is also, for better or worse, have to make it feel safer for people to go against institutional power, because some folks did not feel that way, right? There's got to be a level of cover we can provide. And like, yes, there's, it's got to be sort of a reciprocal or a co-governance relationship where I don't think there's anything wrong with us also fearing our comrades and our closest allies a little bit, because that's kind of healthy. It's kind of the nature of the dynamics. So I think that's a big part of it. And then also, like just the relationship between inside and outside game is what was missing last time around. And I get it. We were all like, there was so little capacity because of the multiple co-occurring crises we're all facing. And then you have a body of like 35 new members and everybody's trying to figure it out. Is we were not collectively organized enough. Members were not collectively organized enough because we were all trying to figure out what the budget process is. Like, BNT gets a certain kind of access, but even that group, budget negotiating team, which I am not on.
A bunch of council members who are theoretically supposed to go and negotiate with the mayor.
And even within that group, there are like layers and tiers of like who has more access and who actually has some ability to be able to share information and things like that. I totally lost my ADHD brain, totally lost my train of thought for a second. But yeah, then there also has to be, we didn't do it. There wasn't, the emails matter. Like if a council member gets like a few hundred emails on a thing, they're shook, y'all. Like, it's just like, it matters when there is something outside of a person's office, when they're getting a ton of emails, when they're getting a ton of phone calls, like that overwhelmingly makes people move. So I just think like really, it's coordination, it's being relational and building like accountability relationships. And we just got to make it also like sexy and cool and fun and a little bit like folks are not also afraid to go against that. And then they're not going to be hurt so much by it.
Right. I mean, what I'm hearing is like, sometimes you can think, oh, it's really corny for like my organizing ask to be like, contact your local elected official, right? Like that's not like sexy or cool, but like if we actually have a really sober power analysis, what we are actually trying to do is think the executive is enormously powerful and enormously strong. And what we need to do is give people the power that they need if they are so moved, or if they're not, to either feel like they can or to be forced to go along with our position versus the much easier option. Yeah. Like that seems to be kind of like objectively.
Can I give the smallest example about the emails?
Please, and then we have a call to action before, because I know we're getting a
the
little
Medicare
bit late,
Advantage fight, right, around retiree benefits. I'm gonna be real honest. Like I said before, I'm a certain kind of nerd. There are some things that I can pick up and wrap my brain around, and there are some things that takes me a lot longer. Like land use, for example, I had to like have it explained a lot for me to like really be able to wrap my head around it. But this was something that was really, really murky and hard to understand. I'm telling you, most of my colleagues were like, I don't really fully understand this, but I got all these emails, so I can't do it. That's the reality. So like, it matters.
So useful, thank you. Yeah, okay. So before we, I imagine that people might have like more to leap in on. I know that we're getting close to like 8:30, and so we've been here an hour and a half. It's a Friday night. My brain is shutting down a little. Maybe yours is too. So what is like for us, what's the next step? Knowing that there's going to be like, there's a final vote at the end of June. That is not like where the fight is won. The fight is going to be won between now and then, right? There is going to be an executive budget that comes out early May. Early May? Yeah. May, April. Okay. Okay. Thank you. If they're on time. There are hearings up until that point. What we want to do at this point is go back into our different communities. Some of us are coming from Harlem or from the Bronx or from Queens, People's Republic of Astoria or elsewhere in Queens. Wherever it is, we want to go back into our communities, right? There will be a local DSA branch meeting in it's wonderful to be here at the People's Forum, but it will be closer to you, right? Wherever you are, it'll be closer. And what we want is to all of DSA's branch meetings in March are going to be organized around the budget. They're going to be kind of miniature versions of this. It won't be repetitious. It'll be much more focused on what are the very concrete steps that we are going to take. Who in this area do we think we need to contact and we need to target to actually create the block necessary to oppose these heinous cuts? Okay, how are we going to do that together? So what I want everyone to, and then I want you to bring your neighbors and your friends and your family to that meeting. So what I want everyone to do, if it's okay, for 2 minutes, you can get out your phone. Everyone, appreciate it. It's the opposite of as a teacher, I'm I'll be like, Peter, put your phone away. But now please get out your phone. If you can go to socialists.nyc /fight-austerity. If we could project that would be awesome. But it's socialists.nyc /fight-austerity. And you will find on that webpage, I don't think that we have, no, that's the RSVP for this. Is that coming up? Oh no. Did someone please tell me that someone has this? I'm so sorry. I'm gonna do my brain is really shut down a little bit. Oh, it should be working. I have it. Why? Fight-austerity. That's what I said. Fight-austerity. Socialist.nyc /fight-austerity. I said it. What? Yes, I can. I should have done a QR code if I'd been. Oh, amazing. Great, you can see it up there. Socialist.nyc /fight-austerity. Or is it? I'm gonna stand. It's gonna make this easier for me personally. Is it? We're okay. We are experiencing some success. Yeah. Amazing. I love this. Okay. If you scroll down, you will find the branch meeting that is close to you. For almost all of them, except for Labor Branch, you can RSVP right now. Just do that. Just go whatever is closest to you. 6 geographic branches. And we're gonna take 30 seconds. Hi. James is so excited. So you're gonna RSVP, and then we're gonna do one more thing. I just want you to think of 3 names of people who are people you know, friend, roommate, partner, neighbor, not a political person necessarily, not an activist, not someone who's already involved, who already knows, but just someone who cares, right? Maybe you know them through the PTA, whatever it is, right? I want you to write their name down. 3 names, everybody. I should see little thumbs going. and then when you leave here, like tonight, like before you get on the subway, right? Like right tonight, not tomorrow, not when you're like, oh fuck, I had to do this thing because Kay told me to. No, like tonight. I want you to invite them to come with you. And these are almost all of them are at the end of the month, so you have about a month to like, invite them and then remind them. But I promise it will be an interesting, useful meeting where you will take a concrete next step, and you are going to bring someone who is not currently political, but who this stuff affects because they are a teacher, a parent, a student, someone who uses the road, someone who uses the library, someone who throws stuff out in the trash, right? They are someone in this city who depends upon the city administration and depends upon each other like we all do, right? And you're going to bring them to this meeting. And at that point, we're going to be, like, however many people, we're going to be like 4 times as big. Great, wonderful. So we're all doing that. Great, amazing, great. Thank you so much. So I guess maybe, I don't know, it's really late. It's almost 8:30. Does anyone have like a real audience? Do you guys have like does anyone have a burning addition, please?
I do. I hope it's burning for other people. It's burning for me. First of all, I'm really happy that there's a librarian up there. I am a librarian by degree, and I worked for NYPL for almost 7 years in communications. And I just wanted to say for everybody here who's not aware that a library is often the only safe space in a neighborhood. It's usually a place where little kids go and get story time, where seniors go and read their newspapers, where kids go after school, where people go to learn computers, they learn ESL, they have job resume things. I went around to the Bronx branches. I went to the Clausens Point branch once, and I found that the librarians there, they had a significant houseless teenagers in the branch who didn't have any identification, and librarians were helping them get IDs so that they could get jobs and so that they could actually have a history, because they literally didn't have any IDs because they were living in, they were houseless. So that's what you're talking about when you're talking about cutting library budgets, all of that. Not just people checking out books, although that's great too. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you so much. I am now my own runner. Irfan.
I guess this is gonna be a theme. I'm in DC 37, local 371, formerly 1930, which is NYPL. And one of the fun things that I did was like look at the archival footage and videos and like stuff. And there's like immigrant narratives. There's like Nuyorican poets talking. There's like Lou Reed talking about Max's Kansas City in the 70s. DJ Kool Herc talking about the birth of hip hop. Like I don't think people realize what they lose when they lose that. Right? We lose our culture and our history. And especially when you think about film, if that disappears, it's gone forever. And it's appalling that in the digital age, some things can be lost. But our history and our voices and our culture is lost when we don't fund these things. And when we do fund these things, researchers get to tap into it, and like library workers and programmers get to like share it with the public and really like shape people's lives and again shape our coming history, I guess you'd say, or the future, I should say. But I think that's one of the stories we need to tell, is how invaluable what we have and what we could lose if it were to happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna do 1, 2, 3, and that 4. I'm going to try to wrap us up by like 8:40 because I know that People's Forum has to close at 9. Really glad to see that people are impassioned. So Ryan, please.
Thank you, everyone. I'm really excited about this event. I'm a public school teacher, and I know that when the budget went through at the end of last school year, it like took us all by surprise. It just like happened really quick, and then we had hundreds of millions of dollars cut from the school, and we're dealing with that right now, and like the really low morale, people saying that they're leaving the schools, not being able to hit all the benchmarks for class size, everything that was named earlier, and it's going to get worse by this budget. And so it's quite terrifying to imagine our day-to-day, not to mention the lives of our kids. So I'm excited that this is happening. I am curious if we had an event like this for the city budget last year. I think it's great that New York City DSA is like taking this and we have the time to kind of gather our forces. But I do have a strategic question of, as you were saying, we can kind of move the needle before the actual budget vote, but like, I'm curious if the budget gets voted down, let's say we're not able to move right now with the executive budget, like, do we then go to like a plan B? Is it something like the federal budget where like services shut down and there's like a lockout? I'm just curious if that's even at all in the sort of strategic arsenal, or if it really is like, can we move the needle before then?
Well, if I could answer a little bit, I also don't think it's as simple as we're gonna plan and execute a strategy to vote down a budget, right? Like, part of why we organize too is, we're assessing the environment each and every day. Strategies have to be nimble. We have to be able to move, but it may very well be that at the end of the day, our organizing is such that a budget passes that is better, far, far better than what would have passed without opposition, right? Without a pressure campaign. So yes, of course, we want to be organizing to get all of the things that we want, need, and deserve. But that's, and we're thinking about long-term strategy too, right? In my mind, it is really important, for example, to go from 6 people really grounded and clear in a vision, or 6 people willing to say the truth about a thing, whether or not we knew certain cuts were going to take place or whatever it is. And like being able to grow those ranks, it is building for years and years to come. So there are lots of ways to look at this. There are lots of wins to be had. And I think that the picture will get clearer sort of like as time goes on, if that makes sense.
Hey, hello, is this on? Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, hey, my name is Eric. I think a lot of the conversation has also been about like relationships and also social alienation and things like that. And like one really great way that, for us to kind of cohere a force for against the mayor and all that in our organizing is like kind of have joy as well. I want to shout out that a lot of people I know are going to a party / fundraiser tomorrow at $3 Bill. So yeah, we have fantastic spaces like the People's Forum. DSA has recently opened up an office in the Lower East Side, and continuing to grow these spaces does take money, but it also really takes relationships too. So like even if you aren't part of DSA and you just kind of want to like meet other comrades and socialize, it's gonna be a really great party tomorrow. So was that? No, I don't want to say the bit.ly, but you can like you can just look at the Twitters.
Thank you, Eric. I'm gonna do right here and then in the back.
Hi, everybody. My name is Josh. I work for the New York City Housing Authority. I'm a local 375 DC 37. It's a really great gathering. I know it's getting late. The one thing that I think it's essential we do is go on the offensive against their bullshit that there is no money to pay for the budget, because we can paint this for apocalyptic provision of what we're going to lose. But even if there is a surplus that's going to debt service, things like taxing the rich, tying into that kind of campaign, tying into the fact that there's always money to subsidize corporate welfare, that Adams has money to subsidize luxury development, and especially because I know this happening at the Housing Authority, is fighting against privatization of public services, because there's always money for that. They keep a shadow set of books, a shadow set of consultants. Like I said, at my job, we can't tell the difference between a consultant and a worker anymore, even though NYCHA cries poverty, but they'd rather blame the residents for not paying their rent, right? So the point of it is that, privatization is erosion of public service. It's also union busting. And it's a source of, we know the money is there. So please, let's take it to them on that.
And last comment.
Hi, my name is Grace. I'm here. I've been wanting to get involved in my North Brooklyn branch for a while, but I work as a substitute teacher. for an agency, which has been really interesting, especially considering seeing the difference between charter and public schools and the sort of different ways they're monitored and the way that funding is distributed. But what's been really interesting to see is with the elementary group is how some of the age groups, like even with the absence of enough support staff in schools, like even with the best of intentions, even if we had enough staff, these students have missed crucial social emotional milestones because of the pandemic. And that's just like an extra level of support that if we're coming at it with the same punitive policies in schools, and then even more, we're throwing cops at the problem. It's just so upsetting to see that students who are acting out or showing any kind of behavioral issues, I mean, they went online in second grade. They hadn't learned to read yet. So many social emotional development milestones where we're learning to talk to our peers, we're learning to solve interpersonal conflict with people our own age are stalled. And we come back and it's like, we can't just expect everything to also go back to normal.
Thank you so much. I think I want to bring us, that's a really powerful note, I think, to end on, right? Like the idea, like there's this kind of collective amnesia that like, oh, the crisis is over. The crisis is not over. The crisis is keenly felt, right? And the idea that we can just sort of deal the austerity logic of like, we'll just deal and subsist on less is so so counter to reality, right? I want to let us go. It's 8:40. I know. I'm just gonna like James is gonna plug one more event that you guys should feel moved to join, and then I'm going to invite us all to leave. And thank you so much to the People's Forum for having us.
How y'all doing? I'll be quick. My name is James Ennis. I work for New York Communities for Change, actually. I'm a WFP member. I'm also a BUM chapter member, but I work for New York Communities for Change. I'm the public safety organizer there. I sit on a steering committee for something called the People's Plan, along with Kay. And along with the Progressive Caucus, we are actually having a rally at City Hall on March 7th. So I just want to plug our little rally because it's something that coalitions are working on together, like NYC, DSA, and working with the Progressive Caucus, the new and improved Progressive Caucus, by the way. So I just want to plug that March 7th, we're going to be at City Hall making a lot of noise. So that's all I wanted to plug. 11 a.m. I'm sure Kay will be sending out a link at some point for it because I don't know the Bitly either.
I definitely will do that. Okay. Thank you once again so much to the panel. Maybe we can just applaud them for giving up their evening. And thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you to the People's Forum for having us. Have a great night. We'll see you very soon.